We're on Facebook.
All right. Welcome, Facebook viewers and YouTube viewers there on MNN. Thanks for tuning in. I'm here, Andy Humm, with
Mick Meenan.
Hey, Mick, how are you?
Andy, good to see you.
Nice to see you, too.
Good to be with our viewers.
I understand that Ann might be back next week. Are you ready for that? Yeah, we'll see.
Well, I'm sure people miss her.
I miss her, too, for sure. I don't know if we're just about to go on, and we have a lot of news to cover, as you know, from just reading the papers. So here we go.
Another busy week.
We have to really escalate the noise we make so that we'll be heard.
Welcome to Gay USA. I'm Andy Humm.
And I'm Mick Meenan.
And Mick is in for Ann, who tells us that she expects to be back next week and says that she has quite a story to tell. We'll just leave it at that. In the news, the protests against the Trump assault on the environment, migrants, LGBTQ people, and women intensified around the country this week.
Longtime AIDS activist Peter Staley says Trump will be remembered as the president who relaunched the AIDS crisis and a lot of other world health crises as well.
Horrible. But gays to the rescue as Trump cuts AIDS funds. Elton John and Brandi Carlile step up to bridge the urgent gap internationally.
Two big cases affecting LGBTQ people and health went before the Supreme Court this week.
And we had 3 wins on trans rights in lower courts.
Pope Francis, who changed the tone but not the substance of the Roman Catholic Church's anti-LGBTQ theology, dies at 88.
We'll have a lot to say about that.
Yes.
Trump bragged to the NATO leader how going after trans people is what got him elected.
And Trump opens up a snitch line for the Health and Human Services Department for people to tell hospitals, on hospitals who are still offering gender-affirming care to minors.
And I just learned they're cutting off the funds to the for suicide prevention for LGBTQ youth. Boise defies Idaho's ban on pride flags at government buildings.
Uplifting story. Designer Connor Ives makes a bold statement, and he's getting international headlines for designing a T-shirt for trans people that says, "Protect the dolls."
Suzanne Bevier, who was a veteran of the 1969 Gay Liberation Front, has died at 85.
And the European Parliament will move against Hungary over that government's new anti-LGBTQ laws.
It's about time. But this was still a week of protest, and we were back out on the streets on April 19th. April 19th. And we're going to show you some footage from the demonstration in New York. These were in 700 cities across the country. That's masses of us outside the public library. And then we marched all the way uptown on Madison Avenue and over to Columbus Circle, where Trump has his international hotel. And so it's so inspiring. I mean, there were at least 100,000 people in New York and millions of people across the country. Let's look at some of the signs that people were holding up. Calling it America's moral moment. And then You're Next, which is really a lot of what this is about. You see people being persecuted and picked off. The point is, you're next if we don't keep protesting. And finally, this kid held up the sign which said no, just no to almost everything the Trump people are doing. All right. And then also this week, Rise and Resist went back to the Tesla dealership in Manhattan on Friday, holding up going out of business signs. That photo is by Jackie Rudin. And Tesla profits were down
71% from this time in 2024. That's their overall capitalization. They're taking a huge hit. and it's hurting them.
Couldn't happen to a nicer guy.
Well, he says he's going to cut back on his government cutting inspections starting next month, that he needs more time to focus on his 14 kids.
Right. And we want to remind you that the next big action from this group called 50501 is on May 1st. That's a Thursday. So these are going to be in the evening. Like in New York, it's going to be in Foley Square at 5 o'clock. But you go to 50501 to their website. Just Google it. I'll link to it in our email if you're on our email list at gayusatv.org. And you will see where the action is in your neighborhood. Because really, these things take place in little towns, big cities, everywhere.
It's going on across the country. And the mainstream media needs to do a better job of covering this, because it is quite apparent that this is not just the coasts, east and west, or maybe Chicago. This is happening in small towns, villages, all across the country.
Everywhere. And, you know, we're going to bring you another inspiring message, I think, from Representative Becca Ballant. She is, the Vermont out lesbian member of Congress, and she spoke on Democracy Now! And here is what she had to say.
You lost your grandfather in the Holocaust?
I did. And I have often asked myself throughout my adulthood, what would I do in the face of such depravity? And the answer is, you don't lose your voice. You stand up. And he lost his life in the last few weeks of the war, standing up for another who was imprisoned. They were on a forced march out of Mauthausen concentration camp. And one of his fellow prisoners fell behind, and he stayed back to help him, and they were both executed. And that has ridden me my whole life. You do the right thing, even in the midst of depravity, even when there is danger. You have to have skin in the game. And that's my message to all Americans. We all have to stand up for each other.
That's the message. And by the way, she also talked about how the Trump people are moving in on farms in Vermont and just arresting people who are migrants who are working in the fields, and, so that they can't, get their crops out.
Correctly. And then we will all not be able to have fresh fruits and vegetables to eat.
Right. Okay. So further developments in the case of Andre Jose Hernandez Romero. This is that gay stylist who was swept up in the sting that was sent to the El Salvador prison.
California gay representative Robert Garcia was down in El Salvador to with a delegation of other representatives to petition to see basically a habeas corpus petition. Show us this man, Andre Hernandez Romero. Let us know that he's alive. Let us know that he's able to freely speak to us without interference. It doesn't appear that they succeeded in being able to do that. This is a concentration camp that the Trump administration has set up with a thug head of state, Bukele, down in El Salvador. And they're going to have to figure out a way how to undo this.
Well, Trump wants him to build 5 more facilities for citizens of the United States that he wants to send down
yesterday,
there. The bad guys, the rapists, like him.
Well, yesterday he said, ha, 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 that was only meant as a joke. But this is really, really bad stuff. And we're going to talk about the Pope later. But I'd also like to know what the Catholic Church and the Vatican is doing about this. 6 Jesuits were massacred in El Salvador in 1989. They're now facing trial, including the former president of El Salvador.
You mean the people who did it?
The former president of El Salvador is an international fugitive. He's been charged by the Salvadoran government in the plot to massacre 6 Jesuits in 1989. This is a huge scandal in El Salvador. What is the Vatican doing about this concentration camp?
The United States is totally allied with thugs around the world now.
Right.
I mean, and look what we're doing. We're cutting off Ukraine and siding with Russia. Come on. I mean, we're the bad guys now.
Yeah. Well, it's time for, I think, the floor of Congress, the floor of the House of Representatives to resound with calls for the freedom of Andre Hernandez Romero and the other illegally captured people who are being held hostage in this concentration camp.
Democrats are making noise about it. You're finally seeing a couple of Republicans say this is a screw up, but Do something about it. You have power. Do something about it.
Andy, you were the one who said that this young man, Andre, should be released and he should be the Grand Marshal of the New York City Pride Parade.
Well, Cleve Jones actually is launching that effort around the country, saying all Pride parades should make him the Grand Marshal.
I agree.
Now, let's give some, 60 Minutes did draw a lot of attention to Andre's case 2 weeks ago. But Bill Owens, the executive producer of 60 Minutes, is resigning because he says they're not letting me do my job anymore because corporate, which is Paramount, they don't want trouble with the Trump administration. And 60 Minutes has been doing a lot of stories that probe all the excesses of the Trump administration.
Well, what would Ed Murrow say? Good night and be well. I mean, Ed Murrow must be rolling over in his grave at the thought of 60 Minutes kowtowing to the Trump administration.
All right. Let me we try to start off with stories where we're actually making some progress, because we are making some progress. We had a trans win from a federal judge in Boston last Friday, partially blocking the Trump administration from enacting a policy that bans the use of the X marker that is used by many non-binary people on passports, as well as the changing of gender markers. So this is Judge Julia, what's her name? Kobik. Who was appointed by Joe Biden. This was an ACLU case. So it only requires the State Department to allow 6 transgender and non-binary people who are plaintiffs to do this, but the ACLU is working to make it a national precedent.
It's a stay.
Just for those 6.
This issue is going to advance to the appellate division, and I guarantee you this Supreme Court is just salivating at the thought of getting this in front of them.
More about the Supreme Court later. The Ninth Circuit, which is out there in the West, is allowing transgender service members to keep serving in the military while the HRC lambda legal lawsuit against the Trump administration continues. But this order means that the nationwide preliminary injunction remains in place, keeping transgender service members in the military. See what Pete Hegseth has to say about that, if he's still around when this show airs.
Or he might be too busy doing squat thrusts and push-ups. I'm not sure.
And then in Washington State, a federal court ruled that Premera Blue Cross discriminated against transgender teens when they denied them gender-affirming chest surgery. And so they won that case out there. Okay. Let's talk about what's happening to the AIDS crisis and what happened this week in Washington. The AIDS activists went down there and put coffins in front of the State Department. We have footage of this. Let's run it for you if we can.
PEPFAR has saved over 25 million lives around the world. We are stacking hundreds of coffins in front of the State Department where PEPFAR is run. Marco Rubio is in that building. He and Elon Musk shut it down 2 weeks after Trump became president. Each coffin represents 100,000 patients who are on the PEPFAR meds. It represents the deaths we're about to see.
There are over 20 million people who are running out of treatment every single day that this continues. And that is why we are here today, to let everyone know that people's lives are on the line.
When you turn off your HIV meds, your immune system collapses within months. It's an absolute time-dependent crisis that's going on right now.
We created a program that brought Democrats and Republicans together across decades to do one thing: save lives.
Like many of you, I've spent time outside the U.S. And what I've been told is that before PEPFAR, this is what the side of the street looked like. Piles and piles of coffins. And these programs deliver life.
We told people that we cared for them, and in caring for them, we cared for each other. And this administration in that building has decided that we do not care anymore. We will stand up and we will remind you of the humanity that you choose to forget.
So And don't think just because, this is PEPFAR, which affects the world, this is not going to affect us. I mean, the State Department has also cut off the funds for the people who were preventing HIV infection in children.
Correct. South African officials predict that the aid cutoff could result in 1 more million deaths by 2030. That's 5 years from now.
All right. Now, but so congratulations to Peter Staley, you saw there, Charles King,
It's a fantastic
others got on a bus at 5 o'clock in the morning and went down there, put together all those coffins. That's amazing. And it dramatizes what we're going through.
Very, very strong video.
Gays to the rescue. As Trump cuts the AIDS funds, Elton John and Brandi Carlile are stepping up to bridge the urgent gap internationally. They see these funds getting cut off and they feel they have to step up with their foundations and take prompt action. Now, look, they can contribute a couple of $1 million. I mean, this is billions of dollars that we're talking about that have been cut off, but it's something. And that's others are going to have to step up to fill these gaps because the United States is abandoning the effort.
Sir Elton said, in conjunction with this new effort with Brandi Carlile, he mentioned that Putin has already kicked his foundation out of Russia. And Elton John said that there are 1.2 million people in Russia who are HIV positive, 430,000 of whom are not being treated. 430,000 people in Russia alone not being treated. So this is not a case of so-called third world countries in Africa or elsewhere that are going to be impacted by this. As you mentioned earlier, this is going to wind up in our cities.
Yes, because again, if the virus mutates overseas, because people aren't treated, it comes around the world, along with a lot of other diseases. Tuberculosis, which they were getting under control, and all these other diseases that we were getting under control.
Measles.
Yes, measles in the United States. All right, more about that later. Let's talk about Pope Francis. Big story, obviously, this week, who has died at the age of 88. There he is when he was first picked. It was the first Pope from Latin America. He's Argentinian. And we have another picture of him when he was just a young Jesuit priest. He was also the first Jesuit. Now, look, there's people seem to think this guy, they felt he opened things up. He set a completely different tone. And then there was a lot of talk about how he handled gay stuff, because almost at the outset, he's on a plane and he's asked about, whether he could accept gay priests. And he says, if someone is gay and he searches for the Lord and has goodwill, who am I to judge? Who am I to judge? And people went fainted, like they thought, first of all, he's used the word gay and he's not judging us well. It was as with everything with him, it's always a little cryptic about where he really stands on these things.
Well, he was replacing a man who was a rabid homophobe and probably a closeted gay man.
Oh, probably.
And that's Pope Benedict.
Yes.
And you and I both at Gay City News 20 years ago reported on this extensively.
Yes.
When the Pope, who at the time was known as John Paul II's Rottweiler and head of the Vatican's Office of Doctrine, was referring to gay people as intrinsically evil. Intrinsically evil. Just consider that for a moment.
Intrinsically disordered. Yes.
That this was the language coming out of the Vatican at the time. And so the arrival of Francis may have been somewhat promising to some people, but as it has turned out, he really did not turn around the language in terms of what it really meant to be gay and to be Catholic.
But again, the popular perception is, he was for the gays. That's what sort of the lazy reporters would say. But let's go over the record. People are, when it comes to this, people are hungry for crumbs from the Vatican because it was so resistant on all these things. The Advocate even made him Person of the Year in 2013. But, when he addressed pilgrims in Slovakia, he stood up, against even adoption rights or any kind of rights for gay couples. He did things like living very simply, eschewing a lot of the trappings of the office, getting down there with the people. And he urged his fellow bishops to do that. And he got rid of some of really hardliners, the real hard asses in there, and he shook up the Curia. But Francis said that among the stream of corruption in the Curia, which are the people who work in the Vatican, a gay lobby exists, and we need to see what we can do about that. So he was, and of course the Curia, I mean this is a church where 80% of the people who work in the Vatican are homosexual, and half or more of the priests are homosexual. Higher. And so that's the hypocrisy of it. And he never acknowledged the enormous contributions of these men, and of course is totally closed to the idea of women serving as priests.
Well, I would have been a lot more comfortable had he discussed his own sexuality.
Well, I don't
openly.
I don't actually.
Well, why is that sacrosanct?
No, it's not sacrosanct. Whatever. Anyway, the whole idea is they keep everybody in the closet. He often spoke up for migrants, often, and displaced persons. He's very clear about that. But how did he really get faithful Catholics to embrace and take in migrants and be more receiving them? He certainly set a different tone about it, and that was great. He called for peace all the time, but what war did he stop? Seriously, he called for, action on climate change, but did he move governments, Catholic faithful, to embrace these issues?
And his number one priority upon being elected Pope was to stop the clergy sexual abuse crisis worldwide, and he has failed to do that. And we could spend an entire show talking about the failures.
Yeah.
The fact of the matter is that the most recent church-sponsored investigation in France has it that 330,000 children were sexually abused by French clergy. Okay, so the numbers are staggering.
And yet we're in an orgy of adulation of the man who heads this outfit, and what's that? So what's that about? I mean, I kind of think that there's almost like a pathetic impulse among human beings to want daddy to be good and daddy to take care of us.
Well,
and they accept a church run entirely by men. I mean, I can make a solid prediction right now. His replacement is going to be a man. I mean, there is just no room for women. The person is going to be selected by about 100 cardinals, 80% of whom were appointed by him.
And some of whom have been implicated in the sexual abuse of children themselves. There'll be a New Zealand, a cardinal from New Zealand who was found not guilty by the church, and the police said there wasn't enough evidence, but there was a huge scandal in New Zealand. Let's not forget Uncle Ted McCarrick, who just died this month, who was
the cardinal of Washington,
who was in 2 conclaves that elected popes,
right.
Okay, and who was found to be a serial abuser.
So sorry if we're popping some bubbles here, but that's, we want to get the record straight. And even
I don't think you're popping too many bubbles.
He dined with transgender people, but he condemned gender ideology. He said transgender does not recognize the order of creation. And he did come out for decriminalizing homosexuality. He said it shouldn't be a crime. But behind the scenes, he talked about faggotry in seminaries. He did this twice, just last year.
Right.
He was kind of losing it. And he never apologized publicly. He had the Vatican issue a statement saying, "Oh, we're sorry." And that's it.
Well, he kind of suggested that it was just sort of boys' locker room talk that he had engaged in when he had mentioned this slur in Italian, I believe. I mean, the point again is, if you want to engage in the conversation, if you want to be one of the boys, well, then tell us who you are. What is your sexuality? Explain to us what has been your experience with being a priest and dealing with your sexuality.
Well, that's the thing. This is a church where they demand that priests be celibate. Now, celibacy means not living in the married state.
Correct.
No Catholic is supposed to have sex outside of marriage that is not open to procreation. That's the standard, which is abused by 99% of humanity.
And 99% of the Catholic clergy.
Exactly. So it's all hypocrisy. Now, and the thing is, although he opened things up and set a different tone, the men who are attracted to the priesthood now are even more conservative than they've ever been. That's the only, because who wants to join an organization where women are not treated as equals?
Well, certainly in the United States, these guys are really hard right adherents. A lot of them are Opus Dei. A lot of them have been encouraged to join from far right Catholic organizations like those led by Leonard Leo, and where William Barr, the former Attorney General, was raising funds. So these guys are not joining for the same ideas that were present in the church in the 60s and 70s about helping the poor and reaching out to the downtrodden. That is not their mission.
And look, I understand what he's really about, and what the church is about is maintaining, to a great extent, their power. And to maintain their power, he felt he had to open things up a little bit, but not too much, because the church in the third world, which is attracting a lot more people than it is in the West, if you want to keep them on board, you got to maintain a lot of conservatism about a lot of things.
Andy, by and large, in this country, the United States, the Catholic hierarchy and these young men joining the priesthood detested Francis.
Yes,
they were at no loss of words to deplore this man.
and he tangled with them, and he was open in tangling with the American.
I mean, he was
bishops.
referred to as Satan by former Archbishop Vigano, who was the Vatican ambassador to the United States.
Right. Now, he did meet with gay Catholic activists, unlike his predecessor or any of his predecessors. But he maintained that our love was a sin. He met with this Reverend, what's his name, Martin.
James Martin.
A fellow Jesuit who had worked to advance gay issues in the church. And he had an ongoing correspondence with a dear friend, Sister Janine Gramick, who was at New Ways Ministry for 40, 50 years and done all this work. They used to correspond together. But again, they were clinging to crumbs that were coming from the table and saying that these were great advances. And,
young gay Catholics who are getting married are not clamoring for it to happen inside of a Catholic church.
Right.
They really aren't.
So you could say he was a man with humane instincts trapped in an inhumane institution, but he was the leader of it, so that he perpetuated its misogyny and its homophobia and transphobia, even while trying to sound more welcoming. Because he always said he welcomes people, but you got to, if you can't affirm my love and the way, then come on. You're not respecting me.
Well, he was like Reagan in that regard, sort of having a silver velvet tongue while also wielding the iron fist.
I think he was more liberal than Ronald Reagan.
Well, I'm talking about his communication style.
Yeah.
I'm not talking about his political ideology.
So no doctrine was changed under Francis. He did. What else can I say? He did openly criticize Trump's treatment of migrants, by all this build a wall stuff. He was asked about that when Trump was first running for president. And he said, a person who thinks only about building walls, wherever they may be, and not building bridges is not a Christian. And Trump responded to that. How dare he? I'm a Christian. He said, come on. And he, so anyway, and he called the Pope's statement about him disgraceful. But here's what Trump posted this week. Melania and I are going to the funeral of Pope Francis in Rome. We look forward to being there. What? I mean,
who looks forward to going to a funeral?
Only a psychopath. He talks, oh my God. And then, as you say, there's the whole abuse thing. And
the abuse scandal is front and center of Francis's papacy, and it is going to mark his legacy far more than his back and forth with Trump on migrant policy. The abuse scandal will define Benedict's legacy, and it will also haunt Francis's.
Yes, and I say this, and I know we have Catholic viewers, and I used to be a Catholic myself.
As was I.
But I had to get out. And, people have to think about supporting an institution that still maintains that we're evil and that does not embrace the equality of women.
American Catholics worldwide need to understand that the man who baptized you, who gave you your first communion, who heard your confessions, and the man who will say your funeral is more than likely a gay man.
Well, homosexual, because they never come out. There are a few that are out now, priests. There's a priest up in Fordham who's a theologian who's openly gay.
Look,
He's been on the news.
I was educated at a Jesuit high school. You don't have to tell me about gay Jesuits. I'm very aware of that.
I'm talking about openly gay and affirming of themselves.
Right.
And by the way, just to finish this off, and we could go on for a long time about this, but, I came across the fact that Pope Paul VI, who was the Pope when back in the late 60s, early 70s, from 63 to 78. That's him. Montini was his name. He was allegedly the lover for decades of Paolo Carlini, an actor who was in Roman Holiday with Gregory Peck and Audrey Hepburn.
There you go.
Now, what was amazing about this was that the Pope in St. Peter's Square decried the story about this that came out and said it was, horrible and slanderous insinuations. So, I mean, I was amazed that he even addressed it. Why would a pope address somebody saying that you're
Well, maybe
gay?
he got his talking points from Cardinal Spellman,
Back in
New
78.
York's former head of the
I can tell you
archdiocese.
stories about Spellman, who was definitely homosexual. But by the way, Pope Francis declared Paul VI the saint in 1978.
Right.
Let's get back to America.
Okay.
We got a couple of court cases at the Supreme Court this week. God, they were busy on gay issues and HIV issues this week. The first one, actually, it was the second one that was argued. So a Maryland school district has in elementary schools some gay-themed books that are used in classrooms. There they all are. Books like, they had a long discussion in the Supreme Court about Uncle Bobby's Wedding and whether
Right.
this was appropriate. And of course, the parents who are suing over this, mostly Muslim, but some Christian, Catholic, are saying, we don't want our kids exposed to this. We want to be able to opt out. And the school district, they sort of tried it, but they said, look, this is a hell of a thing to try to, every single time a theme comes up that you might be offended by because of your religion. And why are you offended by two guys getting married? It doesn't say you have to do it. It just says that it's part of society. And what about the gay kids? And how are they supposed to feel, et cetera? Anyway, the way it was going, this Supreme Court, any case that comes along, they always favor, religion over us.
Well, the Beckett Fund is the entity that brought this case to the Supreme Court. They're 8-0 in wins since 2012 in front of the Supreme Court. They brought the Hobby Lobby birth control case. They represented the Catholic sisters who wanted to fight against abortion.
Little Sisters of the Poor.
Correct. The Beckett Fund is a hard right group of conservative Catholics with very, very wealthy, deep pockets.
Yeah.
And they are determined to find a way to overturn gay marriage.
Yep.
And this is a way at starting to chip away at that.
And then there's the other case that was heard on Monday. It's called Kennedy versus Braidwood. Now, this is a little complicated. There were some it's an attack on the ACA, the Affordable Care Act.
Right.
They're saying, you're telling us, federal government, we have to cover preventive services, including PrEP for HIV. And that's facilitating homosexuality, and it is against our religion. Now, here's the thing. The case did not turn on that. It turned on, does the health department, the HHS department, have the power to appoint these people to make these decisions about what should be covered? And actually, the court seemed to be leaning on, leave that in place, because it would wipe out a lot of things. All right, so we might, quote unquote, win the case. The Trump administration did not oppose us on this because Bobby RFK Jr. is the head of HHS now, and he can appoint all these people to tear down these programs. And we might lose. We might win the case and lose on the services.
This is the Beckett Fund again. It's behind this case. This group is allowed to sort of jump the line in front of countless other litigants wanting to get their cases heard by the Supreme Court. This hard right Supreme Court, the nominees that Trump put in there were all Beckett-funded candidates. Okay. And the salient point with this case is that they want to overthrow the Affordable Care Act because that is President Obama's signature achievement. Okay. And this is like attacking the New Deal and FDR. These people cannot get past the fact that for 8 years we had a black president who governed effectively. They cannot get past the fact that gay marriage is legal in the land. They won't rest.
But Mick, I don't think they care about dismantling the ACA. Remember, John McCain voted, I'm not doing that, right? And that saved the act, right? But they don't care about that anymore. They just do what they want to do. We're in charge of the ACA now, and we're just going to implement it in a very different way.
No, I strongly disagree.
They're not going to repeal it.
No, they very much want to do exactly that. And that is,
I know they want to,
and they're attempting to do it through the courts, not through Congress.
Oh, I'm saying they don't have to. As I said, well, we'll see how this case turns out. We'll know in June. But progressive activists are worried that they're going to go after contraception coverage, vaccine coverage, and other scientifically preventive services.
Like PrEP.
Yeah, yes, because that's the way RFK Jr. is. You know, I mean, RFK Jr. at HHS has declared that gender dysphoria is no longer protected under a critical piece of legislation meant to protect people with disabilities from discrimination.
Right.
I mean, see what I'm saying? They're not changing the law. They're just saying we interpret it in a different way.
No, they're trying to besmirch Obama's legacy. They're trying to sort of erase history and the fact that we had a black president for 8 years.
And, you know, folks, I mean, this stuff gets buried and under all the bad news. Trump cut $1.3 million in grants to a Brooklyn food pantry because they accuse them of serving food to illegal aliens.
Correct.
They don't ask homeless people to show a card to get a bowl of soup. I mean, the heartlessness.
These food pantries are not just for homeless people, Andy. I use a food pantry in my neighborhood in Queens. There's an arrangement with the Department of Agriculture.
Yes.
There's an arrangement with the Department of Agriculture where American farmers sell American produce to American middlemen who then give it out to the food pantries. It's taxpayers' money, United States Agriculture Department. It's a win-win.
Right.
The farmer and the consumer get great
and I should say
products into the stomachs of American people.
I've used the thing from my local city council where you can get a bag of groceries if you're a senior.
No, these are blueberries from Maine.
Right.
These are peaches from Georgia. I mean, this is what you're getting, and this is what Trump wants to end. What he's really doing is he's hurting American farmers.
Right. That's unbelievable. And then he just pays them off and subsidizes them while screwing everybody else. Okay. Let's move on. When the failed Secretary of Defense, Pete Hegseth, was called upon by the Democratic Party to resign, you've read all the problems there. We've got a picture of Pete, I think, somewhere, maybe. Yeah,
there he is, all inked up.
With why isn't he in El Salvador in prison?
He looks like he's ready for the Berlin Leather Festival.
Those tattoos. But he responded when he was called on to resign by the Democrats, your agenda is illegals, trans, and DEI, all of which are no longer allowed at the Department of Defense. Oh, my God.
Yeah.
What a monster.
Now, what concentration camp would those tattoos enable him to be sent to?
Exactly. Come on, if they wanted to. Well, maybe they will if they really want to get rid of him. All right. In Maine, Trump escalated his attacks on the Maine governor, Janet Mills, because she stood up to him and said, I'll see you in court. Trump has demanded that Mills prohibit transgender girls in the public schools from participating in sports. She was the attorney general of the state before she was governor. And she says, look, I'm bound by state law, which prohibits discrimination on the basis of gender identity. She said, look, the whole issue of trans women in sports, it's all worthy of debate, but this is where the law stands now in my state. And so the Department of Education says they're going to pull all education funding if they don't get rid of 2 transgender girls playing on sports teams. And the Pam Bondi, the Attorney General, wants to pull back funds retroactively from Maine. Where are you, Susan Collins, standing up for your state? She's the senator there. She's the Republican senator there. So it's quite a battle, and she's worthy of it. Janet Mills.
Oh, she's more than able to go toe to toe legally with Trump. The question is that the Democrats still have to keep winning the argument in the court of public opinion.
Well, okay. And the Trump administration has opened up a new snitch line to report what it calls violations of his executive order protecting children from chemical and surgical mutilation. So, if you know about, somebody in your hospital who's still helping trans kids with care, you've got a snitch line you can call. Even though, there was a ruling by U.S. District Judge Lauren King in the Western District of Washington said that, this is a violation of their constitutional rights.
Right. You know what snitch line is needed? The snitch line where parents can call up law enforcement to report on hard right-wing clergy getting public taxpayer money to operate camps and other organizations where children are being sexually abused.
Well, sure.
That's the snitch line that's really needed.
Well, I think we've gotten to the point where the lid is off that issue, that people are much more likely to report it. And, in the old days,
Right.
if you were a kid who was molested, you often didn't even say anything to your parents. And if you did say something to the parents, they said, shut up about it. He's the priest, or he's the what? Don't do anything
The
about
minister.
it. I think that's changing.
Well, that's hard to tell because law enforcement hasn't done its job and these organizations don't report as they should. We need to have a national investigation like Australia did, like Ireland did, like Canada has done. Pam Bondi, concentrate on protecting America's youth.
And obviously, Pam Bondi has absolutely zero consideration for protecting LGBTQ youth.
No.
And it's all about anti-Semitism on campus. It is a problem in some places. It should be looked at, of course, and investigated. But what about the abuse of the rape of women, the abuse of gay people, et cetera? All these things, all of it should be looked at.
She's a complete yes woman for this administration.
All right. CNN is reporting that the IRS is now planning to take away Harvard's tax-exempt status.
Right.
This is going to be a battle royal. And, Harvard is standing up to the administration because they asked ridiculous things. But now they're saying, give us a list of all your foreign students who are here on visas and tell us what they've been involved with and what courses they're taking. And we're going to decide if they can stay here. And if you don't give us the list, we're just taking away all the visas from all the students.
Right.
This is fascism.
I mean, they're looking at what people are saying, these visa applicants are saying on TikTok and on their Facebook pages. This is
I'm worried
this is
about
beyond intrusive.
I'm worried about going overseas because when I come through customs, they can say, let us see your phone and let's see what's on it. American citizen, let us see what's on your phone and what's on it.
Yeah, well, they just
without a warrant.
Well, they just nabbed a former New York City councilman for child porn when he was coming back from
really?
Cuba, Dan Holleran.
Really?
Former New York City councilman from Queens, nabbed at the airport at JFK.
They're not going to find that on my phone, but they are going to find a lot of anti-Trump stuff.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. Let's go to administration. Okay. State Department reorganization. I mean, these are huge stories, and we're spending a couple of seconds on them.
Well, there's only so much time.
But the State Department reorganization targets human rights programs and others focused on war crimes, democracy, and getting rid of them. All these things that we used to stand for. And then Trump recently met with the NATO Secretary General, Mark Rutte. We have a picture of them together. And he went on and on about annexing Canada and Greenland and all that. But he also bragged in the meeting how he used transgender people as political pawns to rile up his base. He said he would tell Republicans, bring it up a week before the election to win votes. He's admitting, it's so cynical. But I mean, that's the way he is.
It was his Willie Horton ad.
Yep.
I was watching the World Series last year, and those ads, those anti-trans ads came up with Kamala Harris. Yeah. And I said,
Kamala.
And this is going to be an absolute blowout.
Well, we could debate about what actually turned things, but that was obviously their thrust, because it didn't hurt Democrats who were running for Senate and things like that, and for representatives. But the Alabama State House of Representatives has passed a slew of anti-LGBTQ bills. Could go on and on about that. But I just want to point out, while they devote their attention to this, census data shows that 41% of Alabama households are struggling to afford everyday expenses, ranking third worst in the nation. But don't worry, they're going to have a don't say gay law in your state. Now, Idaho Republicans wanted to ban pride flags on government property, any government property.
Right.
So I think we have a video about what happened there. Do we? Maybe we don't.
For now, it seems Boise is sticking by their standards. Well, during debate of that bill, it was mentioned how it was oddly focused on just one Idaho city because the only examples they showed of someone flying a flag not on that list were pictures of pride flags flown in Boise. But we were surprised to find, after reviewing all the committee hearings and chamber debates, nobody seemed to mention the bill's lack of enforcement. And to clarify what I said about nobody having an answer about that enforcement, the governor's office referred us to either the Ada County Sheriff's Office or Boise PD. And ACSO told us today this is the first they're hearing of this law. But since City Hall is on Boise City property, enforcement is up to Boise Police. And we have yet to hear back from BPD, nor have we heard back from the Attorney General's office. So no enforcement mechanism in the law, but it did have an emergency clause, meaning it went into effect with Governor Little's signature instead of the usual July 1st effective date. You may be wondering why that is. Could it have anything to do with the fact Pride Month happens in June? Maybe. Oh, by the way, the city of Bonners Ferry is considered a border town, and this was brought up during debate. For years, they have flown a Canadian flag outside City Hall to welcome our neighbors from the north when they visit Idaho. But we called today, and that flag still flies outside Bonners Ferry City Hall. Official flags of other countries are allowed under this law, but as the law says, that's only to commemorate special occasions. So I wonder what's so special about a flag flying 24/7. Has anybody called for the removal of that flag? I guess we'll just have to wait and see with that one.
Okay, so Boise is standing up to them and saying, you know, we're just going to fly the flag. And P.S., you didn't put any penalty in it, so, you know, what are you going to do to us? Now they're looking at penalties that would apply to Boise. Okay, in Vermont, this is a very disturbing case. In Lamoille, Seth Brunel, who was charged with second-degree murder in the 2022 killing of a transgender woman, Fern Feather. We have a picture of her. This was a couple of years ago. There was a motion for a mistrial in the case because of the way evidence was handled and some discussions with the police. And so they're letting this guy out on time served.
Well, he pled guilty. It's a slap in the wrist. The guy is going to really walk away with having killed someone. He first faced a second-degree murder charge. His lawyer contended that in the police car, a deputy coerced Brunel into speaking without him having his Miranda rights cited. Right. So there are technicalities involved, but the bottom line is that the woman was stabbed to death. It was a brutal crime. The activists and the community in Vermont are not happy with this, and nor should they be. The guy got a slap on the wrist. Right.
Let's talk about your friend Connor Ives.
Well, Connor Ives is from Bedford, New York, Westchester, just north of the city. And he has made a career for himself as a fashion designer. He lives in London with his husband. I don't know much about his husband.
We have a picture of him, I think, Connor Ives, don't we? Yes.
But this is my vote for this week's uplifting story. This guy, in a flash of creativity and brilliance, came up with the slogan, "Protect the Dolls," which is sort of in the British idiom of the dolls, meaning the ladies who are transgender.
Right.
And he went over to a hot press machine in his studio, wherever it was, and pushed down the lever and made his first T-shirt. And now you can't even find them to buy. They're selling like hotcakes.
And he gives all the money to Trans Lifeline. And he says, look, it's kind of hard actually to get excited about this. It feels upsetting that this is the world that we have to be in. This is the statement we have to make. Are you kidding me that we have to stand up this way? But we do.
Right. I mean, and he's had a successful career designing for shows and at various other events. But this is what he's going to be known for at least the next short while.
He's getting celebrities like Pedro Pascal.
Yes.
We ran a picture of Pedro wearing the T-shirt last week, and the singer Troy Sivan. Okay. By the way, Philadelphia's 26th Black Pride events are this weekend, April 24th to 27th. For information, go to phillyblackpride.org. I have an obit to do. We lost Suzanne Bevier, Bevier. She was an original member of the legendary Gay Liberation Front, which was formed during the Stonewall Rebellion in 1969. She died. She was 85. She was involved with the groundbreaking Come Out newspaper. This was so exciting.
Yes.
There were a couple of gay publications before that, but she designed this as an artist. She designed this Gay Liberation Front thing, which said, "Let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go, let's go." And then this other Gay Liberation image, which is a picture of a lot of the original Gay Liberation Front people, which
70s image, quintessential.
So, I mean, I have an article by Perry Brass, who was also in Gay Liberation Front, about how exciting it was to be part of that at that time. And so she is dead at the age of 85. All right, international news. Thousands have taken to the streets in Hungary. We have footage there as the country bans LGBTQ pride gatherings. So what they did was, and as you can see, they're not allowed to have gay pride things.
Right.
So they do gray pride, which is clever.
Gray. It's basically meaning that everyone is dark inside and all the time. And that's just perfect for a government.
Yeah, I mean, Hungary has had gay pride in Budapest for 26 years.
Correct.
And it's always been a very big, exciting thing. But Orban, who was the model for Trump's fascism, is passed these constitutional amendments against gay stuff over there.
About gays gathering, whatever that means.
Right.
I mean, and I would tell Viktor Orban to pay attention to what happened in New York City when the New York City cops tried to prevent gay gathering. It resulted in Stonewall.
Right. Well, and they are standing up. And members of the European Parliament went to Hungary and said, look, this cannot stand. We're going to go to the European Court. We're going to overturn this. You want to still be part of this, of the European Union? And maybe he doesn't. Maybe Orban doesn't want to be part of the European Union. Get rid of him.
Well, I suppose that he's opening up the back door to Russia. Is that what he wants?
Like we are.
Maybe we're giving them the front door.
All right. So we told you last week about how the High Court in Britain, did this big decision that said, for the purposes of our Equalities Act, that's not trans women are not women. Only they say, quote unquote, biological women.
Correct.
It's a very disturbing decision. Of course, J.K. Rowling was thrilled about this, and they brought the case. But the court kept saying, but trans people are still protected from discrimination. Well, they just unleashed something. Trans women who are now arrested on British railways are going to be strip searched by male officers. I don't know how they determine all this. Do they feel under your skirt? It's insane.
Well, that's exactly what's going to happen. And then there will be more court cases.
It's just insane. And anyway, so a disturbing decision. And also in the United Kingdom, J.D. Vance is demanding that Keir Starmer, the prime minister, you want a trade deal with the United States, get rid of your hate speech laws, because we don't like laws where we can't attack gay people, basically, is what he said.
Right, and perhaps black people as well.
Yes. We got a Brazilian congresswoman, Erica Hilton, who is transgender. She says she was issued a U.S. travel visa listing her gender as male.
Yep.
So she was elected to the Congress in Brazil in 2022. She was supposed to be on a panel at Harvard. She canceled the trip. She says, I felt violated, disrespected, and I felt my country's powers were being invaded by a completely delusional person, a sick man who occupied the presidency of the United States and feels he owns the truth. So there it is.
So now the U.S. State Department ostensibly is trying to undo birth certificates issued by foreign countries.
Yes.
It's it's absurd. You're going to hear more from Erica Hilton. This lady is a canny politician. And she came up from the streets of Sao Paulo, which is the largest city in Latin America, and she knows her way around an argument.
And Sao Paulo has the largest pride gathering in the world.
That's right. And, you know, this woman wasn't invited to Harvard because she's a dummy. It's because she has something to say, and she's very good at getting her point across.
Okay. We do want to hear more from her. All right. Some entertainment news. I saw Smash the Musical. That's Robin Hunter there at the center, starring as the actress Ivy Lynn, who plays Marilyn Monroe. It's complicated. This is based on the TV series Smash. It's not exactly the TV series. We have a picture of the finale there. You know, it includes Brooks Ashmanskas as the director of this production about Marilyn Monroe. It gets a little confusing. There are about three women. I'm not going to give too much away, but there's about three women sort of not vying, but who are considered for the role of Marilyn. It got a little confusing. I mean, but he plays a very gay director, and it is. I just think the plot was a little overstuffed.
You think the show has legs?
Well, it may. The songs are by the gay couple of Shaman and Whitman. You know, who have won Tony Awards, et cetera, et cetera. But it's certainly a big production. What kind of time do we have? The Drama League nominations are out for Broadway and off-Broadway. And what would they do without gay people? Becoming Eve, the one I saw about transgender rabbi coming out to her Orthodox father, that was nominated for Best Play. Cole Escola's O Mary, which Cole is back on Broadway in. The Picture of Dorian Gray, based on the book by Oscar Wilde. Best Musical, they nominated Drag the Musical at New World Stages, and Smash, and Stephen Sondheim's old friends. And I mentioned Brooks Ashmanskas for Smash. He was nominated. Kit Garner, who's openly gay, for Romeo and Juliet. Andre DeShields in Cats. Cole Escola in O Mary. David Greenspan in, I'm assuming you know David Greenspan. Jonathan Groff, who's, haven't seen him yet, but just in time, he's playing Bobby Darin. And Andrew Scott, openly gay, he does a one-man Vanya show. The Tony nominations are coming out on May 1st. We got a minute and a half. What do you want to get off your chest?
I think that it's very, very important to keep the focus on this gay man that's being held down in El Salvador. To me, that is this week's most important story. And I think it's very important. I know they're trying, Lambda Legal, the Human Rights Campaign, they're trying. And he seems to have a very good attorney out in Los Angeles. I don't know whether or not she's a lesbian, but she said this is the worst case she's ever seen in terms of the immigration cases she has tried. This guy has got to be freed from prison, and he deserves to get American citizenship.
Well, they moved the father from Maryland to a different facility after the senator went down there. But it's still, we should not be sending anybody overseas to prison
and paying for it.
You want to deport people who are committing crimes. You convict them, you have them serve their sentences here, and then you deport them to their own countries.
These men are not guilty of crimes.
But you can't, right? You can't just send people because they have tattoos to a foreign prison because you just assume that they're gang members.
There's a photo of Andre Hernandez Romero kneeling and praying, getting his head shaved, and it brought back images of the Second World War.
We'll leave you on that note, and we'll be back next week with Ann.